I would say our modern political world suffers from two main problems. And this is two problems that are in danger to disturb the cohesion of our societies. On the one side, we are dealing with the problem of limiting political power in favor of a separation of power. And on the other side, we observe that the gap between poor and rich becomes broader and broader. Between the different continents on the one side, and also between different lands, but also within our societies. And as Plato said, this is one of the main reasons for stases, civil wars. This gives reason, these two problems, to look at our two cultural sources. The Bible on the one side and the philosophy of antiquity on the other side, which were deeply intertwined already within the Bible, for example in the New Testament, but also in the reception history of the Bible in the last 2,000 years. Antiquity and the Bible, they are, as Ernst Troeltsch said, verwachsen, intertwined. So I chose on the one side Plato's NOMOI and the book of Deuteronomy on the other side. And they already deal with these two problems and the problem how to correlate economy to the political constitution, because only to organize the political constitution without organizing the economy, and both books are of that opinion, is not possible. This has to be done together. So let me go into Plato's NOMOI. The Chronos Zeus myth in Platon's dialogue Politikos argues that it is no longer possible to live in our period of Zeus in an ideal best state as in the period of Chronos, when the state was ruled by the divine demons. In our period of Zeus, when the gods had led off the world, the politician is in danger, even more cannot avoid to be corrupted by political power, to be greedy for more power, and to be corrupted by the greediness for wealth, wanting more and more wealth. The answer is the subjugation of the politician under the law, so that the politicians can no misuse the law to promote their own advantages and interests. And this meant for Plato that also the economy had to be adjusted to the political constitution, and this, I would say, is the most important point. We cannot discuss a political constitution in the Bible without discussing the economy on the one side, and it's entirely impossible to do the other things on the other, to discuss the economy without discussing the political constitution. This is something that connects Plato and Deuteronomy. In his NOMOI, Plato drew the conclusion out of the Politikos for the constitution of the state. By the way, bracketing his earlier Politeia, when he estimated now to be, which he estimated now to be a model for the period of Chronos, but no longer for our times. And I shall concentrate in this lecture on two aspects: the political structure of the constitution of the state on the one side and the economy on the other side, both in Plato and in Deuteronomy. That means Plato was convinced that it did not suffice just to outline the political constitution of the second best state without correlating the economy to the political structure of the state as a precondition for the rule of oikonomia in the state. The lack of a correlation of the political structure limiting political power by democracy to the economy, limiting private wealth, was in Plato's eyes one of the faults of the Athenian democracy. They did not correlate constitution and economy. in the 4th century. And also the authors of the post-exilic book of Deuteronomy were convinced that the limitation of political power on the one side and the limitation of private wealth on the other side are decisive for the program of an ideal society of Israel. So let me go into the question, for example, at first, what is the basis for correlating these two texts? There is no direct literary connection between these texts, but it's very sensible to compare them because they are coming from the same time, 4th century, and both are written for the ideal of a new society, a utopian program for a better society, including a better economical behavior of its citizens. But this does not mean that they are unrealistic. Both are not unrealistic, and this is really important, so they can be realized. Plato wrote his NOMOI for an improvement of the Athenian society of the 4th century when he was disappointed of the oligarchic government of the 30 on the one side and the development of the Athenians' democracy on the other side, where groups of nouveau riches get more and more power within the democratic society. So it became a kind of plutocracy in Plato's view. Both books revitalize, and this is also very important, older traditions. They are old-fashioned in their time to a degree, and their utopian program was, on the other side, an old-fashioned program, using the ethical values, Plato, of Athens of the 6th and 5th century, of an agrarian society, and also, of course, using the time of Drakon and the Solonic period for his NOMOI. The authors of the post-exilic book of Deuteronomy used the traditions of the pre-exilic Deuteronomy, especially of the time of Josiah, and these traditions were also preserved within the book of Deuteronomy of the 4th century. Now let's go into Platon's NOMOI. In designing his Cretan city Magnesia, Plato is guided by the insight that excessive poverty and wealth on the one side and excessive poverty on the other side are a universal source for stases, fractions, and civil wars in society, and for the disruption of society. So Plato construes the organization of the economy of Magnesia in such a way that the extremes of excessive wealth and poverty are avoided. And he starts with an agrarian economy and an equalization of land property. The farmland shall be divided into 4,050 portions of lots, kleroi, with one lot for each family. Each land lot shall become the property of a single family, what was to be confirmed by a solemn religious ceremony of sacrifices and prayers, for the land has to remain in the family, cannot sold and cannot bought. This is the one side, and of course on the other side it is an agrarian society because we have the principle of idiopragie. Only one business for one person, and of course he has, the citizen of Magnesia has to be a farmer. He can't neither be a craftsman nor a trader, and this has to be done by the metics. It is Plato's intention to prevent Magnesia from becoming a plutocratic oligarchy. On the other side, Plato does no longer, as in the Politeia, favor the ideal of a strict economical equality of all the citizens of Magnesia, but introduces 4 poverty classes. And the basis of its basic value, timema, of course, is the land property, the kleros of the family. And the riches may have the fourfold of it in movable goods. But if they have more, any surplus above this maximum has to be delivered to the city and the temple. On the other side, this division of four poverty classes has no direct impact on the election of the magistrates, so that wealth does not touch the democratic rights of the citizens of the lower classes. Plato is intensively arguing against any kind of oligarchic privileges of wealthy citizens in the election for the magistrates of the city. And here, of course, the political constitution is connected with the economical constitution. And that means Plato criticizes the democracy of Athens because it limits the isonomie to the political sphere and does not extend it to the economy. In order to strengthen the barriers against any oligarchic and plutocratic influence in the state, the Magnesian currency cannot be changed into other currencies, and the possession of gold and silver is forbidden. So far, the economy, now the constitution. The constitution of Magnesia, compared with the political structure of Athens of his time, shows that Plato follows two contradictory tendencies. On the one side, he uses elements of democracy of Athens, and on the other side, he keeps the functions of the old Areopag before its reformation in 462, the very old function of the Areopag, and connects aristocratic political motives of political power for the best with those of the Athenian democratic constitution. As in Athens, also in Magnesia, the demos of the ecclesia and boule represents the sovereign and is subject of any kind of politics. But there remains a decisive difference between Plato's Magnesia and Athens, because Plato replaces the election by lots by complex procedures of selecting the best for administration by equality, by quality, experience, philosophical training, and erudition. So the election of the 37 nomophylaces, the guardians of law, out of a list of 300 who are selected out of 5,040 families of Magnesia, so that he combines democracy and democratic procedures on the one side and aristocratic elements on the other side in his political theory. Plato reactivates elements of the aristocratic domination of the Areopag, but transforms them according to his idea of a domination of the best, replacing the aristocratic legitimation of domination by blood and genealogy, by the legitimation of domination by virtues, erudition, and achievements. It is Plato's intention to prevent this way a plutocratic development in Magnesia. And just in bracket, it is even today our problem how to bring the best into functions of the state. I think we don't have a really convincing process of election of the best. But this is a problem of its own. Plato's idea that neither an aristocratic genealogy nor wealth shall be used to gain and legitimize political power and political decisions becomes especially evident by his idea of the nocturnal community as the intellectual head of the state, which shall supervise the doctrines and aims of the political actions of the state, but without any executive power. Insofar, this community continues this position of the philosophical ruler in Plato's Politeia, but with one decisive difference. In contrast to the philosophical ruler, the nocturnal community shall have only an advisory task they have to convince by the better arguments. I think this is a very good idea of politics. They have to convince by the better arguments. According to Platon's pessimistic assessment that politicians, as all human beings, are greedy to get more wealth and more political power, and that only a nomos and its organization of the political constitution and the economy can prevent the state becoming a plutocratic and a tyranny. So that's the reason why the nocturnal community has no executive power, but only the better argument. We will see, we find exactly the same in the book of Deuteronomy. Just a short look at the anthropological background of this, for this idea of Magnesia. Plato's outline of the political constitution and economy of his Cretan city is based on his anthropological theory of psyche, with the two parts of epitumetikon on the one side and the logistikon on the other side. And the danger, of course, is the epitumetikon, and the weaker part, at any rate for the late Platon, the weaker part is the logistikon of phronesis, and that means logic. And we have this very famous marionette parable in the NOMOI. I don't read it out here, but it only shows we have different strings in us. Two iron strings on the one side, this is the epitumetikon, and one golden string, that is the logistikon. The two iron strings are very firm and hard. The golden string is weak. That means the logistikon has no power against the epitumetikon. The lower part of our psyche is the stronger part than the logistikon, the upper part of our psyche. And that means the logistikon needs the help of the nomoi of law. Because in the nomoi we have the same what we have in our logistikon, nous. Vernunft would be the best German term for that. The upper self and the higher intelligible order of the cosmos is represented in nous, in the nomoi, and in the logistikon. An anarchy of the soul by greediness for wealth and political influence based on wealth leads to a materialistic worldview, which, as the sophists do, separate nature from human culture, interpreting reason, nous, and with it the nomoi as a human agreement serving the partial interests of single groups within the society. That leads me to the book of Deuteronomy, from the same period, 4th century, in the final shape that we have it. There we find the utopian idea of a society without any poverty. Deuteronomy 50, 4-6. There will be no poor among you, because Yahweh your God will bless you in the land that Yahweh your God gives you for an inheritance to possess. If only you obey the voice of Yahweh and take care to do all these commandments which I give you today, for Yahweh your God will bless you as he promised you, and you shall not borrow and you shall not rule over many nations, but you shall not borrow and you shall rule over many nations, but you will not rule over, they will not rule over you. This is not the society of the 4th century in Judah, as it is, for example, described in Nehemiah 5. It is just criticizing the Judean society of the 4th century. The command which Yahweh has given is related by the anaphoric demonstrative all this command in Deuteronomy 15:5 to the commandment that the creditor shall release the debt of the fellow citizen every 7th year in Deuteronomy 15:1-3. The divine promise of a coming society in the future is not only a matter of divine bless, but we have to do something for that it will become true. And that means another way of economical dealing in society, and that means the release of debts every 7th year. This is one point, a matter of a brotherly ethos in the society. Of course, the idea that the divine bless will end poverty should not be a reason to say we will not do anything, God will do it. Deuteronomy knows exactly it is a human task to do something against poverty. So we have this verse 15:11, for there are still needy ones in your land, which is why I command you, open your hand to the poor and needy brother in your land. And the command in Deuteronomy 23:20-21 is completing the commandments in Deuteronomy 15. You shall not lend at interest to your brother, no matter whether the loan is of money or anything else that can earn interest. To an outsider you may lend at interest, but to your brother you are not to lend at interest, so that Yahweh your God will prosper you in everything you set out to do in the land you are entering in order to take possession of it. We know that the book of Deuteronomy universalizes an old ancient Near Eastern idea of lending money without interest in cases of distress. They universalize this old ancient Near Eastern idea that we have, for example, in the Codex Eschnona. But to universalize it, this is really something new in the book of Deuteronomy. No one, says Plato in his NOMOI, no one shall deposit money with anyone he does not trust, nor lend money at interest, since it is permissible for the borrower to refuse entirely to pay back either interest or principal. Plato does not prohibit loans at interest, but they shall not be legally enforceable by legal lawsuits. The appetite for wealth has to be domesticated because it is an obstacle to gain arete, and this means to lose real happiness in life. So NOMOI 742, there will never concede that the rich man is really happy if he is not good. It is impossible that a man is superlatively good. It is impossible that he should be also superlatively rich. We have seen that the reason for this idea comes from the anthropology, the Platonic anthropology. The book of Deuteronomy also speaks of the limitation of political power, also connecting economy to the political constitution. In Deuteronomy 17, in the verses 14 to 20, we have the so-called king's law. The king must not acquire many horses for himself, and he must not acquire many wives for himself. Also silver and gold he must not acquire in great quantity for himself, when he has taken the throne of his kingdom. And now remember the nocturnal community in Platon's NOMOI. When he has taken the throne of his kingdom, he shall have a copy of this law written for him in the presence of the Levitical priests. He shall remain, it shall remain with him, and he shall read in it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to fear God his God, diligently observing all the words words of his law and these statutes, neither exalting himself over other members of the community, nor turning aside from the commandments. In Deuteronomy 17, king loses his military power and all the means for a triumphant representation of his power. But even more important, he loses all kinds of political power. He has only the better argument interpreting the Torah. That is exactly what we have with Plato. And this is exactly what we have in the law. No executive power for the head of the society. Just relying on the better argument. In Plato, it is the anthropology that is the basis for that. In Deuteronomy, it is the theology, a pragmatic relation between God and his people. If we would now go into the theological arguments and the anthropological arguments standing behind that in the book of Deuteronomy, we would need another lecture. But I think it is important to say that in the 4th century, two different books and two different approaches that are not directly interrelated to each other. I think the only point that connects them is their ancient Near Eastern background that they have to a degree in common. But they are not interrelated, but they became both the sources of our cultural history of 2,000 years. And they are verwachsen, intertwined, intensively, already in the Bible itself, and of course in the reception history of the Bible and in the reception of the political theory of the Bible in these 2,000 years. Thank you.